In the historical landscape of ancient Israel, a man named Elijah emerged as one of the greatest prophets. Despite the scarcity of exclusive written records about him, Elijah's life is intricately woven into the tumultuous reigns of Ahab and his son, Ahaziah, two notable monarchs in Israel's history. Before you go into the video details, we kindly ask you to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell. By doing so, you'll be among the first to access our informative and engaging content. Please consider liking and sharing this video with your loved ones. Elijah's mysterious origin. Elijah, an enigmatic figure in biblical history, emerges from the lands of Gilead with an aura of mystery surrounding his origin. While the scriptures provide limited details about his background and familial lineage, it is in this obscurity that the narrative of his remarkable life takes root. Gilead, situated in Transjordan, serves as the backdrop for the unfolding story of Elijah, a man destined to become one of the greatest prophets in the annals of Israel's history. Despite the scarcity of information regarding his early life, Elijah's narrative begins to unfold in the historical tapestry of the 9th century BC, a period teeming with prophetic expectation. Elijah's physical vigor, exemplified in the extraordinary feat of outrunning King Ahab's chariot, becomes the first glimpse into the extraordinary nature of his calling. It is from this point of departure that Elijah's journey takes a course marked by divine interventions, showcasing the intertwining of the mortal and the divine in his earthly sojourn. Divine Providence at the Brook Cherith. In the unfolding narrative of Elijah's life, a pivotal chapter takes place at the Brook Cherith, where the hand of divine providence is prominently displayed. This secluded sanctuary, nestled east of the Jordan, becomes a haven for the prophet as he navigates the tumultuous currents of his prophetic calling. Following Elijah's bold pronouncement of a drought upon the land, a divine directive leads him to the Brook Cherith, a location shrouded in both geographical obscurity and spiritual significance. In the solitude of this seemingly concealed stream, Elijah experiences a unique manifestation of God's care and guidance. The brook, whose exact location remains veiled in mystery, becomes a lifeline for Elijah. Here, amid the rustling leaves and babbling waters, the prophet witnesses the miraculous provision orchestrated by the Creator himself. Ravens, typically associated with scavenging, become the bearers of sustenance, bringing bread and meat to Elijah every morning and evening. As the land languishes under the grip of drought, the very brook that sustained Elijah begins to dry up under a heavenly decree. It is at this critical juncture, amid the diminishing waters, that a celestial directive reshapes Elijah's journey, redirecting him towards an unforeseen chapter in the heart of Sodom. The Widow of Zarapa, a testament of faith. In the tapestry of Elijah's life, one of the most poignant and faith-inspiring episodes unfolds in the heart of Sidon, where the paths of the prophet and the widow of Zarephath converge. The divine guidance that led Elijah to Zarephath unfolds as a continuation of God's intricate plan for the prophet. As the brook Cherith dries up, Elijah is instructed to journey to Zarephath, a territory not only outside the boundaries of Israel, but also deep within the heart of Sidon, a region marked by its historical association with idolatry and foreign deities. Upon his arrival, Elijah encounters a widow gathering sticks, a woman ensnared by the clutches of destitution and scarcity. In a profound demonstration of God's sovereignty, Elijah approaches her with a seemingly unusual request. "Bring me a little water in a vessel, that I may drink." This request, however, is swiftly followed by an even more astonishing appeal. "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." In the vulnerability of her situation, the widow reveals the harsh reality she faces. She possesses only a handful of flour and a little oil, barely enough to prepare a final meal for herself and her son before succumbing to the ravages of famine. Elijah, undeterred by the apparent scarcity, delivers a message from the Lord, assuring her that the flour and oil would not run out until the end of the drought. Here, the widow of Zarephath emerges as a beacon of unwavering faith. In the face of imminent lack and desperation, she responds to Elijah's divine assurance with an act of obedience that defies conventional wisdom. She prioritizes the prophet's request over her own immediate needs, preparing a small cake for Elijah first, as instructed. This simple yet profound act becomes the catalyst for a miraculous outpouring of divine provision. True to the promise, the widow's jar of flour and jug of oil defy depletion, sustaining her and her household throughout the extended period of drought. However, the narrative takes an unexpected turn when tragedy strikes the widow's household. Her son falls seriously ill, his breath ebbing away. In her anguish, she turns to Elijah, questioning whether his presence has brought a reminder of her sins, and consequently, her son's impending demise. Elijah's response is a poignant display of intercession and reliance on the divine. Taking the boy into his arms, he fervently prays to the Lord for the child's life to be restored. In a divine response, the child is revived and returned to his mother. Miracle on Mount Carmel, a national decision. The climactic confrontation on Mount Carmel stands as a pivotal moment in Elijah's ministry, marking a decisive turning point for the nation of Israel. This epic showdown, recorded in the first book of Kings, chapter 18. The narrative unfolds against the backdrop of a prolonged drought that had gripped the land for 3 years, a direct consequence of Elijah's earlier proclamation. The word of the Lord came to Elijah, instructing him to present himself before Ahab, the king of Israel, with the promise that rain would soon grace the dry land. As Ahab and Obadiah searched for pastures to keep their livestock alive, Elijah seized the opportunity to challenge the spiritual vacillation of the people of Israel. He called for a gathering on Mount Carmel, summoning not only the people but also the prophets of Baal and Asherah, who had become entrenched in promoting idolatry under Jezebel's influence. The stage was set for a dual sacrifice, a litmus test to determine the true God. 2 bulls were chosen, one for the prophets of Baal and one for Elijah, the prophet of the Lord. The challenge was clear. Each group would invoke the name of their respective deity, and the God who answered with fire would be recognized as the supreme God. The prophets of Baal commenced their ritual, calling upon their God from morning until noon, but there was no response. Elijah, a master of poignant irony, taunted them, suggesting that Baal might be preoccupied or asleep and needed awakening. The desperation of the prophets escalated as they resorted to self-inflicted wounds in a futile attempt to elicit a divine response. The silence persisted, underscoring the impotence of Baal. Elijah, with unwavering determination, took his turn. He repaired the neglected altar of the Lord, constructed it with 12 stones representing the tribes of Israel, and prepared the sacrifice. In a dramatic gesture, he ordered 4 jars of water to be poured over the burnt offering and the wood, saturating the altar and making conventional ignition seemingly impossible. As the time for the evening sacrifice approached, Elijah, with unyielding confidence, cried out to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. The divine response was immediate. An overwhelming fire descended from heaven, consuming the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench. The people, who had been hesitant and silent, now prostrated themselves in reverence, declaring, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." The miracle on Mount Carmel became a resounding proclamation of the Lord's supremacy and a call to national repentance. Elijah, fulfilling his role as a prophet, seized the moment and directed the people to apprehend the prophets of Baal. None escaped, and Elijah, in obedience to God's command, instructed Ahab to prepare for rain, for the drought was ending. As the sky darkened with clouds and rain began to fall, Elijah, invigorated by the hand of the Lord, girded his loins and outran Ahab's chariot to the entrance of Jezreel. The miracle on Mount Carmel, a display of divine power and a national decision to acknowledge the true God, reverberated through the land. The people, witnessing the undeniable manifestation of God's supremacy, were confronted with a choice to turn back to the Lord or persist in spiritual vacillation. Elijah's flight and divine encounter on Mount Horeb. Following the momentous events on Mount Carmel, Elijah experienced a period of intense trial and sought refuge from the threats of Queen Jezebel. Fleeing to the wilderness, Elijah made his way to Beersheba in the southern part of Judah. Overwhelmed by exhaustion and despair, he left his servant behind and journeyed into the wilderness, ultimately finding shelter under a broom tree. In this desolate place, Elijah poured out his heart to God, expressing his weariness, frustration, and a sense of isolation. Despite the extraordinary display of God's power on Mount Carmel, Elijah felt disheartened by the persistent spiritual rebellion of the people and the relentless persecution he faced. As Elijah lay under the broom tree, his prayer took a poignant turn. He requested that he might die, stating, "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." In this moment of vulnerability, Elijah, despite his previous boldness, succumbed to the weight of his circumstances and sought an escape from his trials. In response, God did not rebuke Elijah, but instead provided for his immediate needs. An angel touched him and instructed him to eat and drink, providing a miraculous provision of bread and water. Strengthened by this heavenly sustenance, Elijah journeyed for 40 days and 40 nights until he arrived at Horeb, the mountain of God. Mount Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai, holds profound significance in biblical history as the place where God had earlier appeared to Moses and delivered the Ten Commandments. Now, it became the setting for a divine encounter with Elijah. Entering a cave on the mountain, Elijah spent the night there. In a dramatic manifestation, God spoke to Elijah, asking, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah reiterated his earlier lament, expressing his zeal for the Lord and his frustration with the unfaithfulness of Israel. God then instructed Elijah to stand at the entrance of the cave, for he was about to pass by. A powerful wind, an earthquake, and a fire followed, but God was not in any of these mighty displays of natural forces. Instead, God chose to speak to Elijah in a gentle whisper. In this still, small voice, God reiterated his presence, reassured Elijah of his continued sovereign control, and assigned him new tasks, including anointing Hazael as king over Aram, Jehu as king over Israel, and Elisha as his own successor. Elijah, in this divine encounter, received both reassurance and a renewed sense of purpose. Elijah's legacy and prophetic fulfillments. Elijah's story extends beyond his personal experiences, leaving a lasting legacy and playing a significant role in prophetic fulfillments throughout biblical history. His influence can be traced in the New Testament, particularly in the person of John the Baptist, as well as in the teachings and actions of Jesus. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus identifies John the Baptist as a fulfillment of the prophecy regarding Elijah's return. Jesus affirms that if the people were willing to accept it, John the Baptist came in the spirit and power of Elijah, preparing the way for the Lord. This connection highlights the continuity between the Old Testament prophetic tradition and the arrival of the Messiah, Matthew 11:14, 17, 10:13. When John the Baptist is asked directly if he is Elijah, he denies being Elijah himself. Instead, he identifies as the voice crying in the wilderness, preparing the way for the Lord, quoting the words of Isaiah. John's denial may be seen as a distinction between his personal identity and the symbolic role he plays in fulfilling the Elijah prophecy, John 1:19-23. Elijah is prominently featured in the account of the Transfiguration, where Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a high mountain. There, Moses and Elijah appear and converse with Jesus. This event underscores the continuity between the law, represented by Moses, the prophets, represented by Elijah, and the arrival of the long-awaited Messiah. The voice from the cloud further affirms Jesus as the beloved Son, directing the disciples to listen to him, Matthew 17:1-13, Mark 9:2-13, Luke 9:28-36. While Jesus was on the cross, he cried out with the words, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Some bystanders, misunderstanding his words, thought he was calling for Elijah. This moment reflects the connection between Jesus' suffering and the anticipated return of Elijah, emphasizing the fulfillment of messianic prophecies. Matthew 27:46-50, Mark 15:34-36.
If you found this video enjoyable, please consider liking and sharing it. Additionally, subscribing to this channel will ensure that you receive more updates in the future. Thank you.